All right, so this is review number 10, and we are going to be looking at some early American architecture, some more post-impressionism that's going to kind of bridge us over into symbolism, some photography, and cubism. All right, so I put these back in. Again, y'all have this shared with you, but I put these back in just kind of as a reminder of what College Board expects you guys to have from Content Area 4. Just gonna flip through that. All right, so this is, believe it or not, a skyscraper. So this is the Carson Pirie Scott and Company building. Some of the important things we talked about with this work were the fact that it's been in continuous use since it was commissioned. It has that innovation of a steel core. It still has the iron decorative elements on the lower levels, but the core of the structure is steel, which is important because it allowed for elevators and it allowed for the buildings to be taller. We talked about the three-part windows called Chicago windows. We talked about his tripart design where he thought that it was important to have the lower level for commercial purposes, office and apartment levels in between, and then a top level that was somewhat decorative to kind of be a, you know, like a stop, right, for the structure. So this is in Chicago. And it's, well, yes, it's kind of America, Louis Sullivan trying to figure out a style of architecture for the 20th century. It also has a lot of the Art Nouveau decorative qualities. And so that would, Art Nouveau would be these vegetal designs, these ornate pieces of ironwork we see. He is famous for that quote, form follows function, which we talked about quite a bit when we're referring to architecture. Remember that Louis Sullivan was the teacher and mentor of Frank Lloyd Wright, who did the Fallingwater House, so you could get some connection there. So again, innovation in the structure is going to be the use of steel, but it has that continuity, that use of iron, which we've seen before. All these. Oh, one of the things to consider and remember, this idea of architecture as a corporate symbol. We see that in a lot of structures in large cities. And so this is one of the early examples of a corporation actually aligning their image with their headquarters as a building. And we see that with the Seagram building as well. All right, so we've already started talking about the post-impressionist when we looked at Vincent van Gogh, but now we're going to continue on that path. So again, remember, this is not neo, this is post, which means it's after, which means we're going to see a lot of change. We're going to see some approaches being similar, but a lot of deviation from what the Impressionists were doing. The Impressionists were focused on color, but color that is realistic. They were focused on plein air painting outside from life, the artist using their eyes to see, to paint. This made possible by tubes, paint coming in tubes. They were influenced by photography, but they're still painting what they see, right? With Impressionism, they're capturing a moment, they're capturing light. Well, post-impressionists aren't really painting what they see as much as they're painting what they feel about what they see. So the color becomes arbitrary, the forms become flatter, there gets to be more abstraction. So who could forget Paul Gauguin? He's the one who ran off to Tahiti, and his painted manifesto. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Again, this work has not been on the AP exam, would be a great example of discussing symbolism, discussing maybe even an artist masterpiece, right? Because he considered this his masterpiece. And remember, he was even going to kill himself after he finished this because he thought it was the best thing that could ever be done by him. It is has qualities that are old. For example, some of the symbols used from the deities are old. We have the gold corners, and those are supposed to look like this is an old mural, a fresco on a wall. But we have a lot of change. For example, these figures that are in strange proportions. The combination of elements, you have things that are, some of them lean towards more realism, but then you have, you know, these bizarre, almost surrealistic elements incorporated in, and a lot of that again comes through proportion. It has kind of the spiritual belief of the area here in the background, and it's meant to be read from right to left. And it's, you know, where do we come from is the right, the middle, what are we, where are we going? And so it ends with death here on the side. This is the piece that he sent back to be sold in Paris, and it didn't sell until his friends pulled their money together and bought it for him. Enigmatic, not easily understood. It has this kind of a mystery about the work. And so this is really going to be kind of a bridge piece as we go from post-impressionism to symbolism. It's a large painting. Themes of life, death, poetry, symbolic meaning. Hold on 1 second. You guys are gonna have to hold on. All right, sorry about that interruption. We had somebody knock at the door. All right, so this was painted in 1 month's time. He was able to, he worked really feverishly to get this done, and then he was able to actually ship it back to Paris. All right, so there's his kind of write-up about the work. Let's see what else. It does kind of look back to the past. We kind of see that in some of his forms, more similar to the Byzantine. Sorry. Not meant to be fully understood, and we know that because it's symbolic, right? Maybe only Gauguin was able to truly appreciate and understand this work. All right, so this is Mont Saint-Victoire by Cezanne. This is post-impressionism, but again, this is going to be a bridge piece not to symbolism, but a bridge piece to cubism. So we're in a time period where there's just a lot of things happening all at one time, right? And there's a lot of overlapping in styles, and styles don't last for long periods of time anymore. Instead, they're very, very quick. And so Mont Saint-Victoire is a painting that Cezanne made of his favorite mountain, as you do. This is post-impressionist, painted both from studies he did at the mountain. Also, remember, he built a studio where he could see the mountain, and then he also did this from sketches. I would say for form here, we'd be talking about something patchy. He is creating work that incorporates a little bit of line, but also these color patches. So his work is really going to bridge us, like I said, from the post-impressionist, actually from the impressionist to the post-impressionist to the cubist. Oh, right, this guy, Munch. All right, so Munch is going to have a style that is going to be symbolic. He's working at symbolism, but he's incredibly influential on the expressionist painting, specifically the German expressionist painting. His work is oftentimes about suffering, hardship. So the Scream, remember the Scream was one of a set of 4 called The Frieze of Life that he made. So 4 different versions. It's a small work. He's incorporating rather rudimentary materials here, tempera, pastel. Some of them are made with crayon, on pieces of cardboard and cheap particle board wood. The artist is using a minimum amount of forms for maximum expressive quality. And so the use of red, the use of his swirls, that hard angle that comes towards us in the foreground, the kind of ghost-like images, all these things feel bizarre. They feel unsettling, and they're supposed to, remember, because he's painting what is essentially a panic attack, an anxiety attack. And so we see that in his work. So part of a series, we talked about that. And this is also where we start talking about that idea of synesthesia, that your senses could actually unify in times of stress or extreme emotion. We can link this to context because, again, this is happening. This work was made right before the series of 4 was made right before leading up to the turn of the century. And so it's that kind of existential angst that people get when it's the turn of a new century or even decade. All right, steerage. This is how photography has advanced since we last saw it with Edward Muybridge. And so this is the steerage by Stieglitz. The steerage by Stieglitz. It's one of several pieces of ours that are from 1907. Photogravure is a process that is kind of a combination between printmaking and photography. Remember that this work is not about social class. It does represent social class, but the understanding what it is about, okay, is this idea of shapes, values of light and dark, the interaction and juxtaposition of organic plus geometric. And so it's not making a social statement. He's real, or at least that's not what it's primarily doing. This work is about creating a composition. So Stieglitz, remember, owned an art gallery on Fifth Avenue. He was very interested in representing artists at the early 20th century, and he's representing all these painters, and he's thinking, could I create a work of photography that has the same power as a painting? He said it was his best work, represented his ideals best. It's a painting that he made on, or a painting, a photograph he took on board of a ship on the way to Paris. All right, Cubism. We have Cubism joint created by 2 artists, Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. And most people just remember Picasso because, again, remember, Picasso evolved and he kept creating different styles, and he went in and throughout the 20th century creating work that was really continued to be cutting edge. Braque is not quite the same. So unfortunately, people don't remember him as much. Cubism is, of course, coming from this idea of the shapes being abstracted to the point that they become like a cube. Other influences here are on non-Western art. It was influenced by non-Western art, such as the art from West Africa. Cubist work emphasizes the two-dimensionality of the canvas. So much of what we look at in the early 20th century is about the flatness of space. It's not trying to show depth, right? The perspective and depth and realism, forget about it, right? That's 19th century stuff and before. Now we're embracing flatness. Okay, so this is definitely a change. So it's about the surface of the work. It's not about the depth of the work. It's not about illusion as much as it is flat plastic qualities. Typical with Cubism is multiple vantage points, so the objects appeared fractured. 3 types of Cubism. Okay, we have the earliest pre-Cubist work, and then which is where our piece is going to fall, and then analytic Cubism and synthetic. Analytic is the type of Cubism we see with our example of Georges Braque, and then earliest Cubism, 1907, is our piece from Picasso. Oh, that is real weird. Why am I standing sideways? Special. All right, so Les Demoiselles d'Avignon by Pablo Picasso is a large painting. You can see from this weird sideways picture. It's a large painting, and it is almost square. It's a composition of 5 prostitutes who are showing themselves for their client, I guess you would say. And we talked about with this work how it has, this would be a great work to have on the AP exam because you could talk about continuity and you could talk about change. So we've seen a lot of female nudes in our genre as we've gone forward all the way back to Titian's Venus of Urbino, which was influenced by even earlier Giorgiani work. And then we've seen that all the way forward. So the Grand Odalisque, Olympia. We continue to see that. So here we have 5 women who, yes, are nude, and we can see this even a reclining nude, these 2 women in the middle, right? We're seeing from above because multiple vantage points is part of Cubism. But they are much more angular. They have much harder edges than the soft, voluptuous women we've seen before. This is a change, right? So it's both tradition, it's looking back to that ideal, but it's doing it in a different way. Now, certainly the woman on the furthest left is a tradition. This is looking back to the power figures of the Egyptian Old Kingdom pharaohs. And then the 2 women on the furthest right are our non-Western women. They are representing this idea of the exotic, right, coming through West Africa. And then the fruit in the bottom, of course, is related to female sexuality, this idea of women, of the female body. And so that's pretty common representation. We have an almost primary color scheme with our red, our blue, and then the orange has a lot of yellow in it, or peach, whatever you call this, has a lot of yellow. The faces are flat. So again, remember, he's reminding us, hey, this is a canvas. This is a flat surface. But he is painting in such a way that it's still, even in the fracturing, right, it still has interest without having much depth. The Portuguese by Georges Braque. It's a little bit of a hot mess. So this is in that analytic cubist style. It's a fractured object. It's painted from a memory. He's thinking about painting what he remembers of a Portuguese man playing guitar and singing in a bar. He is making it so that, again, you're reminded of the compressed space. The text that he added is purely there to remind you this is a flat surface, right? Typical of the analytic cubist paintings, it's all in a monochromatic kind of brown neutrals color. I love this because it fits so well with what we see in 20th century art. It's the act of painting, not the finished painting. Fragmentation, right, helps me get closer to the object. So we talked about when an object is broken apart, how you study it more than when it's whole. All right, so we actually, you know what, we're going to keep going because this is symbolism as well. We're just going to keep going. All right, so Gustav Klimt. All right, so Klimt was very, very influenced by the work that he saw in Italy, specifically in Ravenna. He went to San Vitale, he saw the mosaics there, and they influenced what he calls his golden period. He's creating work that indicates that aura vacui we saw coming out of some of the classical ideals, and then definitely into medieval, thinking about icons and flattening of surfaces. So this is kind of a bridge piece between Art Nouveau and Symbolism. Again, Art Nouveau is a style that focuses a lot on floral, on decorative qualities like gold. This work is almost square, large. It has a couple embracing. This is supposed to be seen as a tender embrace, although it looks a little painful. You have those masculine qualities of gender identity on his cloak versus on her cloak. They're on a field of flowers, the gold background. This is all speaking to his heavy influence of icons. He started off painting realistic, and then he really went the other way. And it's we kind of see this as the natural plus the artificial. He's thinking about how at this point in time, technology, and again, this is early technology, but technology is transforming the world, and it's making things, it's kind of dealing with the idea of what's real, what's artificial. And so with his painting, he's trying to respond to that phenomenon that's happening. Borrowed motifs, this would be a good looking back to influence from the Byzantine, Greek, Egyptian artist. It was not really popular until much, much later. Very, very typical Klimt. All right, we'll pick up there in a bit.